What exactly is IFS? IFS stands for Internal Family Systems. It is an evidence-based psychotherapy, and I want you to take a look at this as if you have sub-personalities, aka parts that are going to be guided through compassion of the self. IFS has 4 concepts. The self is going to be guided through the 8 C's. That is calmness, curiosity, compassion, clarity, confidence, courage, creativity, and connectedness. Exiles are going to be our younger parts that carry pain and trauma. Then we have 2 types of protective parts. There are managers and firefighters. The way that I like to think of these is managers are going to be proactive. They're going to make sure that our exiles, our younger children, don't get activated. Firefighters, once the younger child is activated, they step in. They can often do this through distractive and impulsive habits. You can look at firefighters. For me, my firefighter showed up throughout college through suicidal ideation, just wanted to numb whenever I felt abandoned. Abandonment is the pain that my younger exile holds. My name is Shawnee Tran, and I am a licensed professional clinical counselor. I was diagnosed with ADHD roughly about 3 years ago, which means I lived a great portion of my life undiagnosed and unaware. Lately, I've been having this feeling of where does my hyperindependence come from? Because I just really, sometimes I want to ask for help. I need help, but there is just something in me where I can't quite bring myself to do it. What exactly is hyperindependence? Hyperindependence is a strong compulsion to do everything on your own. And when I tell you, that is me to a T. Hello. Yes, I know that it can be a good skill. It can also be a survival skill. But sometimes, if I'm being honest, who isn't tired these days? I want to be able to ask for help. That left me sitting with the question, why do I struggle to ask for help? And a part of that sits with me understanding this new part that I met. And what I have come up with is fear of disappointment. I then started to get a little bit curious around where my hyperindependence comes into play, why I struggle asking for help, what part is holding those burdens. I want to introduce looking at what it is that you struggle with curiosity versus the intention of fixing it. If we go in with the intention of fixing it, we may actually miss data that is important to be able to help us to navigate it. If I think about this when I am a therapist sitting with a client and a client comes to me and they are looking for tips and coping skills, I spend a lot of time asking questions and getting curious about what it is that they're struggling with so that I can observe it from several different angles. So with my hyperindependence and not being able to ask for help and really just feeling I'm tired all the time, I got curious around where does that come from? I have found for me that I do my best thinking when I am on a run. Here's the thing about running. Running is bilateral stimulation, which can mimic EMDR. It is not EMDR. However, most of my processing comes from when my feet are hitting the pavement. When I start my run, I really allow for my thoughts to wander. I don't try to zhuzh up anything in particular. I sort of let them come to me and then I process them as they come. It could be a moment where I have a part that wants to talk to me now that the body, am in a process which allows this part to have a direct one-on-one conversation with me. And I have this sort of aha moment that sits deep in my stomach. That is where this part sits. It feels tight. It feels, you know, that feeling you get when you eat and you feel full. And the reason why I'm describing this to you is because this is interoception. As neurodivergent people, we can often have trouble labeling and even identifying what we feel inside of our body. So I have really been focusing on interoception for me. How do I feel in my body? Where does that sensation show up? Because sometimes I don't even have a word to give it a feeling, but I can name the sensation. She sat in my stomach. It felt very heavy, very full. It's so nice to meet you. Tell me a little bit about yourself. And this is when she started to cathartically dump. Here's what I discovered about her. She's between the ages of 18 to 24. When I was in high school, my parents were in the military, my mother and my stepfather. and they had gotten orders to move from Wisconsin to Virginia Beach. I was towards the tail end of my senior year of high school. I don't even remember the conversation that we have around if I was going to stay or if I was going to go. I just remember that feeling of I don't want to have to do my last few months of high school in a completely different school. Somehow it came about that I would have my own apartment. I did have a boyfriend at the time, and I would be living with him my last few months of high school. And I remember looking back and thinking, I don't know how to pay rent. I don't know how to navigate a checking account, savings account, pay bills, all of those things, but I taught myself. Now we fast forward to me starting my freshman year in college. Because you have to use your parents' income when you are filling out the FAFSA, my parents made too much money. I did not get enough student aid. I remember needing money to be able to pay for my books. And I remember first asking my mom, and then my mom telling me to ask my biological father. I have this vision of us sitting in my apartment, my mother and my mom saying, call your father. I call my dad, and he's really upset. My mom and dad did not get along at that time. No one actually came up with the money for my books. I then ended up taking out a private student loan. Things were a little bit rocky and I couldn't pay for my first semester of college. I then needed to drop down from full-time to part-time. I got a job at a bank and then commuted to college. I did eventually move on campus again. I'm still using my parents' income. I didn't know anything about buying a car. I remember asking friends if they would co-sign for me, as if it was like, hey, can you buy me a drink? Here's what I learned about that younger part of myself. She had no choice but to figure it out. There was no one helping her, because if she didn't figure it out, we wouldn't have had the basics such as food, electricity, housing. And here's what I learned from my hyper independent. I was disappointed. No one helped me. Has stuck with that younger part as a burden. We cannot ask for help, because if we ask for help, one, we are either going to be shamed or guilt trip because why can't you figure it out? I also recognize that because she has figured it out in those years, which basically propelled me into adulthood, now we feel better equipped of if we can handle it back then, we got it. We got it, baby. So now as a 40-year-old woman, I often have to go back to this younger part and let her know we don't have to do it on our own. She often doesn't understand that if we ask for help, we might be disappointed. However, we can deal with the disappointment. She would just rather bypass all of that. She doesn't even want to go through the emotions of it because she has learned people will let us down. When it comes to learning about a new part, we don't interrogate them. We don't shame them. We get curious about them. How old are you? What is your purpose for me? What are you afraid will happen if you don't do the role that you do? What are you hoping will come from this protection? Here's what I do know about her. She is amazing and intelligent, so smart, and such a problem solver. And here's the biggest lesson of all. Sometimes healing isn't about getting answers. Sometimes healing is about choosing to stay long enough so that your parts can tell their story. Thank you so much for listening and allowing me to be in your home. I know I'm not physically there, but energetically I am. And I have some questions for you to sit with. Are there any parts that you recently met? Are there any parts of you that you would like to get curious about that you haven't met? I want to thank you so much for watching, and as usual, let's go from undiagnosed and unaware to diagnosed and aware, and wishing you the best on your healing journey.